Hello, and welcome to Mr. Quickest Teaches, an online learning hub that provides video lessons and online tuition in English literature and other subjects of the humanities for the British IGCSE, O-Level and A-Level. In today's lesson, I'll be providing detailed analysis of Sonnet 43 by Barrett Browning. My analysis will be presented with rolling annotations of stanzas, lines, and important words in the poem. I'll emphasize the themes, literary devices, figurative and poetic, tone, structure, language, etc. of the poem. You can get the course that provides stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word written and video analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology at www.mrquickestteaches.com. The written course has been particularly helpful to students sitting the IGCSE because it gives clear guidance on their approved writing styles. Without further ado, let's demystify Sonnet 43 by Barrett Browning. First, a bit of information about the poet. Browning was born 6 March 1806 and died 29th of June 1861. She was an English poet. She was well respected during the Victorian era in Britain and the United States for her amazing poem. The poem is a sonnet, like the title suggests, and then it deals with the theme of the limitless nature of love. And Browning wrote this poem particularly for Mr. Browning, who at the point was not welcome or wasn't a good choice, according to her father, for her to get married to. Before we dive into the poem, let's read the poem out and then we'll take it bit by bit. Sonnet 43 by Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight, for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for rights. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion, put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose, with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So one of the first things that jumps at the reader is the way the poem begins. The poem begins with a question. And at face value, the reader is unsure if it's a lover that's asking Browning, and so she's re-echoing the question, or she's the originator of the question. But I think that she's sort of re-echoing a question that her lover has asked her. Now, the question also appears very simple. How do I love thee? But the question is a bit more detailed, or needs a bit more detail than that. And for me, I think that Browning does a fantastic job in the way she articulates her love for her lover. The question seeks to know the nature. For me, I think that the nature, the level, the quality, extent, condition, the process, the degree, etc. of the love that the Browning feels for a lover. So it's not just like a very simple question, but it's a very layered question. The use of the word thee, you see that in the first line. Thee reveals that the poem was written in Old English. But Browning's response to the question for me is almost as if she's been waiting for it all along. She says, let me count the ways. Her use of let me count the ways reveals a sense of glee and happiness in her voice at the challenge that she's been given. It's almost as if she welcomes the challenge with both hands. And then we also see that there's a use of exclamation mark and a dash at the end of the first line. The exclamation mark exposes Browning's audible expression of joy and emotion at the opportunity to express her love to her lover. So there's this glee and joy in her voice. She shouts and says, let me count the ways. And the dash shows us that after this, she paused to regain her breath, to catch her breath, because she shouted, so she's excited. So when you read this poem, in your mind's eye, have somebody who is excited at the opportunity to speak, which I mean, in modern times, it's not something that most people will be willing to do. And we see that she begins the second line of the stanza of the sonnet with "I love thee." So she repeats the main focus of the question to expose that her love for her lover is deep, and she has unreserved affection, and she's unashamed of it. More often than not, people beat her about the bush or beat around the bush, but Browning seems to just jump into the bush of sorts. I mean, to make her points clear. And she continues that to the depth and breadth and height. Now, all three of these mentioned parts constitute the dimensions. So it encapsulates all the known dimensions: the depth, how deep a place is; the breadth, how wide it is; the height, how high or how tall a place is. But depth is a metaphor for the intensity or the firmness or the deep-rootedness of a love. So when it comes to the poem, we talked about some of the literary devices. One of the first literary devices that we see, for example, is metaphors. So she uses the depth there as a metaphor for the firmness, the deep-rootedness of the love that she feels for a lover. And she uses breadth as a metaphor for a willingness to forgive him when he hurts her, when he does something wrong. And height as a metaphor for a willingness to sacrifice for him and for the love that she has for him. So we see that these three constituent parts of a dimension are not just the words on their own, but they have much more deeper meanings. And these are some of the things that while writing for the IGCSE, you have to be able to express in order to get the points. So not just the public knowledge of the word, but then deeper meanings that the words hold. We also see that she uses repetition as well in the second line. And this repetition is the repetition of the upper sound. The upper sound is like an old manifestation of the AND sound word, the word and. And she repeats it multiple times, twice actually in the line. And for me, the upper sound provides visual imagery of the chain of a love. Like the chain of a love fuses the deep-rootedness of a love to a willingness to forgive, and the length that she's willing to sacrifice for him. So it's like a chain, an unbroken chain. It pieces and fuses all these three dimensions together into an unbroken unit. That, for me, I think is extremely fabulous, because Browning not only articulates a love to a lover, but she does so with words that generations after people can read and then also see the kind of nature of the love that she feels for a lover. The second line is tied into the third line, and we see that in the use of the enjambment of the word height my soul can reach, to the flow of words. Now, this for me highlights the unrestricted and fluid nature of Browning's love for a lover, and the fluid nature of a soul. Like a soul cannot be restrained, that it's free to do as it pleases. And because a soul cannot be restrained, not like the body that can be restrained by maybe the wall or by something, an obstacle, a soul is free. And so she presents that with the use of enjambment from the second to the third line. And we see that multiple times actually in the poem as the poem goes on. And she continues, my soul can reach. Now, the use of the soul there introduces the metaphysical realm. So it's the realm beyond the physical. He also suggests that her love is not only physical, in the sense that she doesn't love a lover because of the physical things that she can see, but that there's this deep spiritual connection between them. And so she says, my soul can reach. Now, the soul, this is also an important point, because the soul can travel more, it's more expansive, it's without restriction, and it's measureless. Can reach communicates the farthest limit that a soul can travel outside of a body. So she's saying that as far as my soul can travel, that's how much I love you. Feeling out of sight has multiple meanings. Feeling out of sight communicates a time when a lover does not show her affection and when he abandons her. She's saying that even in that period of abandonment, she loves him yet, or she loves him still. So my soul can reach. I love you even with that even in that period, and I feel that you're not giving me the kind of love that I'd want. For the ends of being, and I do grace. For the ends of being shows the outside the limits. So the word for the ends is outside the limits. But then she says of being, and I do grace. Being is an allusion to her humanity, her human nature. She feels that sometimes when her lover doesn't show her the kind of love that she should want to, receive, she feels as if she's in abandoned. And Not only that, she says an ideal grace. Ideal grace is another allusion to the relationship that she has with God, a spiritual nature. And she's saying that when there's this out of sight feeling that she receives from a lover, she's unable to, communicate even with God. She feels like a damned soul. But she's saying that even in both situations, her love for him is still constant. It still remains. She loves him still, even in these situations. In the 5th line of the sonnet, Browning again repeats the word "I love thee." Now, that qualifies the word "I love thee" as an anaphora. And this is really important because it keeps the "I love thee" in the face of a lover. Remember, when you look at the poem, Browning is not speaking directly to the reader. She's instead speaking to a lover. And she's pointing at the lover and saying, "I love thee." So it keeps the idea that she has very deep affection at the forefront of a lover's mind. And the reader can share in this sort of love talk between her and her lover. And for me, one of the things that I find particularly striking about the poem is that Browning is female and she's speaking to a man. There's this sense that women are not supposed to express the love that they feel for their men. It's supposed to be something hidden. It's supposed to be the men who woo them. But here we see that Browning is going against the convention of sorts. And she says, to the level of everyday's most quiet need. So again, we see another enjambment. Every day suggests that she generates new love for a lover every day. Everyday most quiet needs also alludes that her love for him is as unavoidable as air, water, food, clothes, shelter, etc. And it's quiet, most quiet. So her love for him is necessary for her. So every day, the way she needs water, the way she needs clothes, the way she needs food, that's the same kind of love that she feels for him. And she generates it for him every day of the week. And because it is quiet, she's trying to say here that it is private in nature. It's not something that is loud and, very public. And this is really important because Browning the relationship between Elizabeth Browning and Mr. Browning, another is also a writer as well, had to be on hush. They had to hide it for a very long time. In fact, when Elizabeth Barrett Browning finally married Mr. Browning, she was inherited by her father. Her father didn't give her an inheritance. So here she's trying to say that my love for you is quiet. It doesn't make a lot of noise. And if you juxtapose that or compare that with modern day love, where people need, if you love me, put me on social media. If you love me, use me as your profile picture. This is especially more striking because love by its essence does not necessarily have to be noisy for it to be called love. She continues that by sun and candlelight. And for me, this is a very important detail because it uses contrast. So when you are asked how does Elizabeth Barrett Browning powerfully present or use imagery to present her love, by sun and candlelight for me is a striking detail that you can use. By sun shows that her love is continuous. It doesn't break. Because after sunlight, then you have candlelight. That's for me is the first explanation. Then the second explanation is that sun is a metaphor for the good times. When her lover is enjoying his best life, physically, emotionally, financially, and he's feeling upbeat about life, he's healthy, he's wealthy, he's popular. She's saying she loves him in all of those periods. And candlelight is a metaphor for when things are unsure. And he's in ill health. In poverty, he's unpopular, at its worst. So here, Browning is saying that I love you when everything is good for you by sun. And I also love you when everything is bad for you by candlelight. So her love for him is not controlled by circumstance. So she loves him in rosy times, in challenging times. And then, like I mentioned, the words by sun and candlelight also provide contrast between the two extremes of the seasons of life and the permanence of a love. So even though he may experience the extremes of life, her love is permanent. And love is always going to be there for him. We also see that she again employs the ampersand in this line as well. And for me, again, it serves as a chain like it did in the second line of the sonnet to tie both periods of life together and say, in this period when everything is good for you, and in this period when everything is bad for you, I'm together, I'm there, it's going to be okay, I love you still. And this is particularly important because in this age, love is fair weather, in the sense that people only love their lovers when everything is going well for them. We also see that she employs dash for a second time. And the dash suggests that Browning again paused to allow a lover some time to take in her words, and also give herself some time to also regain her composure and then also catch her breath. She repeats, "I love thee" again as an anaphora for the third time in the 7th line of the sonnet. And she says, "freely." Freely suggests that Browning's love is unforced. It is given without compulsion. When you give something freely, nobody compels you to do it. So that's like the first explanation for it. Then when you also give something freely, a second explanation, because usually when you're writing in the PE system and you've given the point, you've given the evidence, and you're giving the explanation, it's very advisable for you to have at least 2 explanations or even 3 explanations for each of the points that you're making. And the second explanation for the word freely is that she does not measure the love that she has for him. She doesn't keep count, and it's also given without compulsion. No one is forcing her to love him, as men strive for right. We see that she uses simile here, and she compares the way she gives her love freely to how men strive for right. And this provides visual imagery of the way that men fight, how they struggle for right. And again, the word right is also very important there, because it shows that for her, she thinks that loving her lover is the right thing to do, and she's going to keep at it. So strive shows that she loves him with earnestness, with zeal. She's willing to die for it because it's right. And strive also shows that her love for him is active. It's not some docile love, it's very active. She puts in a lot of physical, emotional, and mental effort to express the love that she has for him. We see that she uses the dash for the 3rd time. And again, the dash suggests a pause. So Browning paused to regain her breath. And he also gave her lover some time to also, take in the words that she's putting across. She continues and mentions again for the 4th time the anaphora, "I love thee." But here she says purely. Now purely shows that her love has no ulterior motives. It is not, there's no strings attached. She's not loving him because of what she's going to gain. She loves him purely. It's pure. It doesn't have some hidden agenda to it. So one of the most famous examples of this is the Trojan horse. So if you've ever heard about the Trojan horse, for example, the city of Troy was being attacked, and when the people could not get into Troy, they sent them a horse as like a gift, unknown to them that there were soldiers hidden in it. Here Browning is trying to say that my love is not a Trojan horse; it's given purely. And again, she uses the second simile and says, "As men turn from praise." So as they there is allusion to the men she's mentioned in the previous line. She's saying that after these men have sort of striven to, after they strove to get right, they turn away when they're about to be given praise. They are about to be said, "Thank you" supposed to be given to them, or honor is supposed to be given to them. She's saying, "I don't want any thank yous, honor, or award for loving you. I love you purely." We also see the use of a semicolon there. It reveals that that's an independent clause, and then she sort of tied that thought together. She repeats "I love thee" again for the 3rd consecutive time in as many stanzas, in as many lines, but then the 5th time in the poem. So Browning is not shy. She says, "I love thee with a passion." Passion reveals that it is earnest. When something is earnest, it is done purely, it's done with force. Passion put to use. Now when she says passion there, for me, it's an allusion to the passion of Christ. So on the cross in Calvary, for example, Jesus had to suffer. So it's called the passion of Christ. And I think she's sort of making an allusion to Christ's suffering as how she's willing to love him, with suffering, with passion. Put to use. Put to use suggests that she grieved a lot with, physically, emotionally, mentally. There's a lot of effort that she put in my old griefs. We see that in line 10. So in my old grief reveals a number of bereavements, parents, close friends that have died. And then even some of the dead relationships. She says, "in my old griefs."
we also see that just in the after that there's a comma and then there's an ellipsis. What the ellipsis does is that it informs the reader that Browning omitted some words. She also became a bit emotional and her voice trailed off. So those are some of the explanations for the ellipsis. And then this poem for me again is a very good poem because while writing about it, you can also talk about how Browning employs punctuation marks. So she's employed that we are going to meet a second exclamation mark, but she employs a lot of dashes, and we see the ellipses here, and then we have caesuras as well in the commas in the middle of the line, like after the word reach in the third line, after freely in the seventh line, after purely in the eighth line. And we also see that again, another comma as well, just in the word grief, just after in the 10th line. So she uses a lot of punctuation marks. With my childhood's faith. This for me, I think, is the purest description of the love that she feels for her lover. Childhood's faith declares that her love is innocent. It is blind, like a child's. And her love will not ask for evidence for promise made. So Browning is telling her lover that I love you with my childhood faith, like a child, the way a child believes. That's the same way that I love you. And she continues with the colon that indicates that she wants to provide more details of what she means by this childhood faith, or all the points she's trying to make all along. And the point for me is very exciting because today love is something that most people are ashamed to express. But here Browning does it so marvelously, like it captivates us, it reels us in. And she repeats again, I love thee. So I love thee. There's this thing in her voice, there's this excitement in her voice that, is also sort of taking over me, like, I love thee with the love I seem to lose with my lost saints. And this is a really touching image here. With the love, there's this specific love, filial love. The filial love is the love that we receive from friends and family. She's saying that with the love I seem to lose with my lost saint. So she imagined that she's lost that kind of love. The kind of love that she can get from family. She said, I seem to lose. So she's imagined that she's lost that love forever. With my lost saints. Again, she alludes to dead relatives. And he also alludes to Christianity, Browning's Christian faith. Because saints is what Christians that are called when they die. And then even before they die, Paul, for example, in some of his letters will allude to the saints that are in Ephesus. So even when you are alive and you believe in Jesus, you're spoken to of as a saint. And we also see a dash here more clearly as a caesura. And it suggests that Browning paused to gather emotions. And I think that around this point, Browning became a bit emotional, very emotional, because she's talking here about people who have maybe presumably are dead, or people who she's no longer in contact with my lost saints. And she pauses, to gather herself and also to gather emotions. She repeats, I love thee for the 7th time. Even though in this instance it is not an anaphora, for me, the 7th manifestation of the word I love thee indicates to us, because 7 is a number that means perfection, that Browning is trying to express that the love that she feels for a lover is the perfect kind of love. And it can also be explained a second time or in a second way, as because it's the 7th repetition of the word I love thee. She's trying to tell her lover that I love thee on every day of the week. I love you on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday. So her love for him is daily. Remember we talked about every days in the 5th line. So we see here that her love for him is daily. And she continues by using hyperbole from the 12th line to the 13th line. She says, I love thee with a breath, smiles, tears of all my life. Here Browning is a bit more emotional. And the emotion jumps at the reader. I love thee with a breath. So here she sort of exaggerates and say, every breath I've ever taken, I love you with it. Every smile I've ever had, every tear of all my life. And we can also see the use of the exclamation mark there at the end of the line. Now, the word breath there is a metaphor for a life. I love you with my life. So these words have deeper meaning than the the usual meaning. So with my life, smiles is a metaphor for all the joys, all the happiness of all the life. And tears is, now opposed in a contrast. So she's alive, so all her life. Smiles are her joys. Now tears is like an opposite or like a contrast to say that with the tears, sorrows. So I love you with all the good things I've experienced. I love you with all the bad things I've experienced. And I even love you with my life itself, of all my life. So we see here in the 13th line that Browning again uses an exclamation mark, apart from what is used in the first line of the sonnet. And here he exposes that she shouts, like there's an excited scream. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, like she screams. And after she screamed, she pauses with a dash to catch her breath. So the poem here is a very emotional poem. And Browning is excited. So it's not some dead poem, but it's a poem that is extremely alive. She continues that, and if God choose. And if God choose. So it shows that she believes that God is the ultimate arbiter of love. If God choose. And if God choose shows that she's living, the only thing that can stop her love is God. And her faith is also exposes Browning's faith as a Christian. It shows her love is not physical. Today, our love for people is physical. People look at how people appear, the body shape. But she's saying here that my love for you is way deeper. It's divine. It's a divine kind of love. And she ends the poem with, I shall but love thee better after death. So her love is going to end ultimately in death. But if God chooses, if God allows them. So if you read the book of Matthew 22 verse 30, the poem speaks a lot about Browning's faith. She shows that if God allows them, because if you read the book of Matthew chapter 22 verse 30, it says that in heaven people are not going to get married. But she's saying that if God gives us permission, my love for you will be better after we die. So here we see that Browning's love for her is eternal. There's no mortality. Their death is not going to stop it. But one of the things that is usually spoken about during a marriage ceremony is that till death do us part. But here Browning is saying that even death and mortality is not going to stop their love, because she's going to love him into the afterlife. Some of the themes of the poem include love, limitless and measureless love, undying love, the difficulty of communicating the degree of one's love. Usually the questions in the IGCSE or most exams that try you on any poem will be asking about the themes. So the question can be something like this: how does Elizabeth Barrett Browning powerfully present the measureless love that she feels for her lover in Sonnet 43? So those are the lines that you have to practice towards. The poem also has a rhyme scheme, an ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD, CD rhyme scheme. And you can see that in the words ways, height, sight, grace. Like you see that the words rhyme. Every day's praise, candlelight, right? So that's the rhyme scheme. So we see, for example, that this poem, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, is an example of a Petrarchan sonnet. So a Petrarchan sonnet is a sonnet that has an octet, 8 lines. The octave, they rhyme. So you see the ABBA from lines 1 to 8, and then a sextet, lines 9 to 14. The rhyming CD, 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 CD. In fact, the entire poem is a fusion of 3 sentences, and it's important that you speak about the structure as you write your exams, because the structure is really important if you're thinking of achieving an A star in the IGCSE, which I think for every student is very, very, very possible. The poem also has an iambic pentameter. You see that in each of the lines. Line 4, for example, for the ends of being an ideal grace. So 10 syllables. So the iambic pentameter means that the poem has 5 metric feet. And then you have an unstressed syllable followed by a long stressed syllable. So you see that in all the lines. So you can actually play with this in the entire poem and see how you can break it down. And it's important that you're able to do this. So it sort of shows the drummy nature, like the excitement, the emotions that are expelled, happy emotions that are expelled by Browning as she speaks about the poem. So those are some of the ideas that are presented by both the rhyme scheme, the use of the iambic pentameter, and the fact that it's a Petrarchan sonnet. Thank you so much for joining this lesson. You can customize how you learn for the IGCSE at mrquakersteaches.com, and you can access stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word analysis of all the 15 poems in your IGCSE anthology. We also provide details on the prose and drama, on characters, the themes, conflict, and other important details, as well as information on the unseen paper. You can also visit mrquakersteaches.com to book private tuition in Cambridge IGCSE and A levels in English literature, geography, and history. Or you can join our tribe on Mr. Quakers Teaches IGCSE Literature on Telegram. Thank you so much for joining the lesson. Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning has been demystified. So until next time, have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.